telling you, Graham, that the reason why I'm loving this is because you're an inspiration to me early on in my own seventh story, because I used to watch you on YouTube driving that amazing R1, and
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, back in the day, yeah, we were one of the first to kind of push videos on the web, which helped get a bit of fame for our cars back then. But now everyone does it. So now the most amazing to the most mundane is on there. But,
and my favorite is of course driving on one of your rallies, and unfortunately you had the roof shear off. That an unfortunate trip, but it was made for a very entertaining video.
My mother made that roof. Such is the way we used to rally. Yeah, my mother made that roof, but bless her, I don't think she made it as strong as it needed to be for the speeds that we were doing.
Well, let's start from the top.
Sure.
Folks, this is Graeme Finlayson, and this is a great pleasure for me because we're talking about the evolution of power. And one of the things we're going to be touching on is electric cars. But before I wanted to get to the Megawatt and what's coming up next for Graeme, I wanted to just touch base on his own story. I mean, you told me that you started with at Westfield with a Crossflow. Is that right?
Hi, Jim. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was actually my first car. Was a Westfield. I'd been introduced to them at university through friend George Martin, not the George Martin, the George Martin, and he was our George Martin. But he had one at university. It was the most maddest, most amazing car I'd ever seen. I'm 19 years old, and he was driving around this Westfield. Looking back, it was an absolute shed, but at the time, it was the most amazing machine I'd ever been in. And thanks to an absolutely insane first introduction to these cars as a passenger, where George was driving it like a maniac and sliding about the place and nearly killing us. From that moment on, I wanted one. So when I left university, I saved up for a year, my first job, and looked around for a good one and found it was a pretty one. It was bright yellow, chrome, 1700 Crossflow in there, pretty standard. It was an SEI, narrow, flared arches, the whole 9 yards. But at the age of sort of 20, 21, it was an amazing machine for me. Because back then, you could not get insured on anything with any speed as a kind of new young driver. And we were able to get kind of M3 level power to weight and get insured on it for a few £100. Admittedly, back then it was limited mileage and stuff like that, but limited mileage didn't really matter when the speedo cable kept falling out accidentally, of course. Yeah, it was great. It was a nice little car. I mean, it looked good, and I drove it everywhere. I had full weather gear, and I'd be driving that Bristol, Scotland, north, south, east, west. It was my only car. Drove it to work, and it was a fun little machine. Just very, very standard. No go faster tweaks on it at all. It was running twin Weber 40s, which sounded great, but didn't start particularly well in the winter. But yeah, nice little car, that one. Good little car.
And tell me what about the step up or step over to bike engines? How did that come about?
It was a long process for that, because effectively I had the Crossflow engine one, and what had happened was, back then my teammate in karting and I had lined up a Formula One test. Formula One test. I'll go in a Formula One car. Sounds better than and it was at Mallory Park, and we didn't want to waste any time due to the limited laps in learning the circuit. So we went to a Westfield track day. organized by the Westfield Sports Car Club at Mallory Park, and we both drove the car, except he smashed mine up.
Oh.
When we were so competitive that, you know, even a track day we were treating as a race, trying to outdo each other. And on the last session of the day, he planted mine into the wall on the exit of Devil's Elbow, and that led me to get a new car, which led me to the next car, which was a Vauxhall engined carbon car. It was all through Mick Cooper, who's a name who's very well known through the Westfield Sports Car Club, especially Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. An amazing individual. I mean, Mick Cooper is, I don't know how to describe. He's like kind of the kindest, nicest, most level-headed, knowledgeable, greatest person I met in motorsport. And he had a carbon car that I envied. And I really wanted to buy. When my car was hit, thankfully my karting partner honored the you bent it, you bought it, or you know, and he did. And with that money, I went to Mick Cooper to see if I could buy his carbon car, which sadly, I remember, you know, he followed us for a while just to check that we weren't complete idiots, and invited me to his garage and took me down there and opened the door, and there was his carbon fiber car, which is just amazing. It was solid carbon fiber, Cosworth naturally aspirated engine, a dog box, rose joints, everything. Really amazing machine. And my eyes lit up, and then he just said, "I can't sell you this." And my heart sank. And he said, but what I can do is build you another one. And I said, "Oh, okay, all right." And I said, "Well, what about engines?" And he goes off to the corner of his garage, pulls off this cover, and he goes, "That's a naturally aspirated Cosworth. I can build you that for X amount of money." And I was, that's a bit too much. And he goes, "Okay, there is another option." Goes off to the other side, pulls off another cover. "That's a Vauxhall engine. That's 200 horsepower. Can build you that for this amount." So it's, okay, now we're talking. What about body shells? And you look up, and there's 3 carbon body shells.
Oh, lovely.
Its cave of parts. What about gearboxes? Off to another corner, cover comes off. That's a Tran X 5-speed straight cut. So, and I couldn't even afford it at that point, but kind of running theme was start just eating ramen noodles, drinking water, skipping meals, and trying to afford motorsport. Mick and I thrashed out a deal, and he built the first carbon car for me, which was an amazing machine. That car I drove everywhere, absolutely everywhere. No weather gear this time. Sprinted all over the UK, and I would drive it there. Tent in the passenger seat, tools in the passenger seat, drive it wherever it was, whether it was Anglesey, whether it was Harewood, whether it was Brighton speed trials. I did everything in that car. Sprints, track days, drags, kit car meets, everything. And it got driven everywhere. But what happened with that one was we were eventually, through again really strange circumstances, invited to compete in Barbados. And I went out the first year to Barbados, which was eye-opening. If anyone ever gets a chance to compete in motorsport out there, you just have to do it. Whether it's
You've written about that a lot, and I've enjoyed just following that. It's great. It's
different. And it's eye-opening. You know, a lot of people would think, I was originally like that too, obviously in the UK, and through a link we had out there, a guy called Martin Atwell, who was building a Westfield out there. He invited us, we met him, and we drank way too much rum, and then we agreed that we'd go out there, and we had told so many people that we kind of had to go out there by that point. And he said, "Yeah, the car will be fine, the car will be fine." So we sent the car out. Having never done a rally in my life, went to Barbados, and it was just totally unsuitable, our car. It was a great experience. Rallying or competing out there is just like, there's nowhere like it on earth. The crowd and the fan base are huge for a start. You know, we were used to coming around a corner on a sprint and seeing 3 people. You come over a crest in Barbados and you'll see 3,000 people. It's the biggest spectator sport on the island, and everyone comes out, and they're enthusiastic and they're knowledgeable. And then you've got the actual competition itself. The driving standard is immensely, immensely high. You wouldn't think it from overseas. You'd think it's a small island. They probably don't have much motorsport, but it's every weekend there's some form of motorsports, and the talent out there is world class. So we got there, and we had Sky Sports following us. There was TV cameras everywhere. We're on TV. We're getting interviewed. As Terry Pankhurst says, it's a cheap way of being a superstar. You know, we're used to trailering to a rainy sprint circuit up north in, you know, somewhere grim, and then next thing you're on TV surrounded by thousands of people. Okay. And yeah, it turned up to the first event, and Martin had assured us the car would be suitable. It was all smooth tarmac, short stages, and turned up to the first event, and it was gravel.
Yeah.
I've never driven gravel in my life. So yeah, it was interesting, and I didn't do too bad at that one. I was encouraged with setup help from my teammates who were out, and fear of looking like an idiot. I think I got second in group on that one, with Martin way off in the horizon winning that one. Only one minor incident on that one, where I crossed lanes with an accident, and thankfully didn't take anyone out. But that wasn't bad. And then the rally itself, back then it was called the Texaco All Stage. We were useless. We were absolutely terrible. It was George and I. We were double driving. I'd never driven a rally, never called a pace note.
Oh my gosh.
We're getting lost on stage during the stage. It was just abominable. But we still had our moments. You know, we had a few cool bits that happened on there where we you know, did some good moves around corners, sliding about, and, you know, entertaining the crowd as such. And the beauty there is that when you finish the event, when you go out afterwards, you're immediately, you know, the people you're out when you, because it really was, I can't describe it different than, it was 2 weeks of drinking that happened to have 2 motorsport events sandwiched in the middle. It was organized by a guy called Greg Cozier, who's a genius when it comes to putting sport into motorsports, still is. And it was called the Rally Carnival back then. And when you went to any of these events, which were organized, which were also big social events, all revolving around a lot of rum, the people there would be not just the drivers and the mechanics, it would be the fans, the spectators, and they would tell you when you did something good, and they would tell you when you did something stupid. But, you know, the feedback was great. I loved it. I remember getting interviewed at the end of it. They said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm going to put a bike engine in here because that's going to work for the regulations, and I'm going to move out here." And it took about another 10 years to actually move out there. But yeah, you know, you say it, you do it. And so when the car came back, because of the regulations out there, a bike engine was the only way to be competitive. And it was in the early days of bike engines being put into Westfield and such like. They had the Caterham Blackbird by then. Westfield themselves were doing the Megabird, which is what Martin had in his car. He had the Blackbird engine. But looking at the regulations out there, and I decided there and then that my motorsport was going to revolve around Barbados. The best option was the smallest possible engine with the most power, because they were running a kind of 1 pound per cc weight rule. So I went for the R1. There was one guy, I forget his name. One guy had done one, had fit one into a Silva at that point, but no one had done one in a Westfield. And so I went back. I spoke to Mick Cooper again, and I think he was just so happy seeing his creation out there doing so much, you know. I said, "Mick, you know, I know this has been 4 years now that we've had this other car, but I kind of want another one." And amazingly, I hadn't burnt him out. I hadn't ruined him from the first build, and so he was up for it. He was up for doing another build. So we took the existing Vauxhall car, sent it up to Mick in Ravenhead, and he stripped it down, and we started speccing out the R1 carbon car. By then, I was in a slightly better job. I had a little more money to spend on it. And just wait for that car to go by, with the help of other fantastic people up there. It was all through the Westfield Sports Car Club. It was like Derek Harder was involved. Gary Bunn was involved. there was the community, the Westfield community up there were just fantastic. They're who made sure that car was finished on time. But we went full carbon interior on that one because the car had an aluminium interior, and what that meant in the sunshine was it melted your leg off. It got so hot.
Yeah.
Couldn't drive the car in anything but jeans or a thick race suit. But with carbon, it stays nice and cool. It never overheats, never gets hot. So went full carbon interior, which I don't know if anyone else had done that by then. We things like a digital dash, paddle shift, all stuff like this, and built up the car. But it was tricky. There was a lot to figure out on the R1. But it was a nice little engine. We didn't need to go dry sumps on that. It was a baffle that saved a lot of weight, and the car was finished. Given it the rally in Barbados was every year, the car was finished the day before it was meant to ship on the boat to go out to Barbados. So I got to test it for about 5 minutes up and down a back road, and then load it on a trailer and send it off to Barbados.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I went to Barbados a week early to try and get some testing in, but it was really just finishing more little bits on the car. The car went out, and the car won its group on its first rally sprint there.
Oh,
and,
that's great.
Yeah, it was a huge, huge relief, and it's really well received.
Yeah.
I can't overstate how good the crowd, the fans, and the whole kind of feeling for motorsport in Barbados is. You're appreciated, whereas in the UK, motorsport is frowned upon by a lot of people. They get angry when they hear you drive loud cars fast. Over there, it's just loved, and so it really made it all worthwhile. But then on the rally itself, I planted it into a wall on the first day, repaired that, and then melted the clutch the second day. So the rally itself didn't go particularly well. But that car competed out there for another 4 years. All the while we were competing, Martin was still competing in his Blackbird and doing very well. He won a rally sprint, he outright, that is, and he was putting in times kind of chopping the Group A cars. And it got to the point where the regulations came to the point for competing out there where they added a 25% weight penalty to the bike engines.
Oh dear.
So it was a car engine car be 1 pound per cc, and a bike engine car be 1.25 pounds per cc. So you're carrying 25% extra weight in something that doesn't have the same characteristics. So we ended up with a 380 kilogram Westfield, which was I think still probably the lightest made. But to compete in Barbados, I had to ballast it up to 590 kilograms.
Ouch.
So the floor, it was a carbon floor, but on the carbon floor above that, we'd have to put in layers of roofing lead, because that was like, and you can mold it, and rolls of roofing lead under our legs.
Oh dear.
That would be about 190 kilograms of lead. You then add a navigator, which was by then George had kind of given up navigating for me, and I was using a local navigator, Jamal Brathett, who's not very established and successful driver in his own right. And so Jamal was probably another, being nice to him, 75, 80 kilograms. There was me in the car. So we'd have this really heavy Westfield, sounding great, made lots of noise with a handful of torque. Yeah. Not really going very quickly. So
not getting off the line particularly quick.
Kind of like driving a Honda. And so although it sounded good, it was beyond the point of being able to get any good results. And so at that point, the next change came, which was that car got sold. That car went off to Switzerland. And I took a bit of a break. I ended up going to normal rally cars.
Yes, I've been following you.
I mean, the usual route, kind of 205, rear-wheel drive 205, because front-wheel drive is definitely not for me. Four-wheel drive all the way from Group N all the way up to Group A. And that went well. I won at each stage, won groups at each stage, all the way up to Group A. And when I got to Group A, the only place to go from Group A is WRC, but I don't have WRC money. That's when the jump from Group A to WRC is, stratospheric. It's not possible. And then the final nail in that coffin was, again, the regulations changed in Barbados. They merged Group A with WRC, which rendered the Group A cars pretty much pointless, and that combined with I also had another hit, quite a substantial one. I probably could have reshelled the car, but at that point it just wasn't worth it. So I stepped away from it at that point. And I had actually moved to Barbados by then. I had accomplished that part of it.
Yeah.
Which was good. And that was the end of that. I took a break from Westfields then. I was still helping out friends who had, like, the Martin's car was still on the island, although had gone to somebody else by then. And I was still helping them out, and I'm still keeping in touch with the community as well, though.
And then you found a somewhat clapped out Westfield and brought it over, did you?
Well, one of the few downsides of Barbados is the cost of cars. Duty is typically 200%.
Oh.
So if you buy a Westfield for, say, £15,000, you have to spend another £30,000 on duty when it lands on the island, then pay VAT, and then pay shipping. So they're astronomically expensive. However, as another example of how much the island loves motorsport, they brought in duty-free for motorsport. So what that meant was, if you were buying a car to compete in, and it has to meet certain criteria, like have a roll cage, a number, 2 seats, and if you're bringing a car to compete in, you don't have to pay duty.
Yeah.
The age restriction is gone. All these things, and you can compete in anything, whether that's rally, whether that's race, circuit racing, whether that's autocross, whether it's karting, whether it's drag. And the drag series had started to take get a lot of people interested in it out here, and had friends competing in it. And so at that point, I said, right, well, let's go back to this. But I'm certainly not going the no torque bike engine route again. Although I love the noise of them. Once you separate yourself from the noise, most bike engines aren't that quick. Sorry to just destroy some illusions out there that bike engine owners might have, but they make a lot of noise and they have a handful of torque, so you got to keep them singing, and they're not very forgiving. If you miss a gear or something, your whole lap is shot. So. But I still do like the noise. I still do like the packaging of them, and the fact that they have a sequential box in there, and it's very easy to add things like flat shifts and paddle shifts.
Yeah.
And the engines are generally quite cheap, which is good. So I decided I wanted to go Hayabusa Turbo.
I remember.
The turbo to get the torque. So I searched around the UK, and I found one that was competing in the JCC series down south. It was ropey looking. But it had all the bits I wanted. So a good friend of mine, Dan Johnson, who had come to Barbados with us an awful lot, but we'll obviously get to him in a minute. He had come out with us to Barbados a lot, and he was in the UK, so he went to look at it, and he said, yeah, it's not in great condition, but it's got all the bits you want. And so I bought that, shipped it to Barbados, comes over on a banana boat. And that landed, and I just stripped it down to a raw chassis and built it all the way back up the way I like cars to look. So full carbon interior, redid the body, went to JPE yellow, which is, to me, the best color for these cars, and added all the toys that I like. So, Nitron shock, Siltec suspension, flat shift in the full Pro Shift system for shifting on there, digital dash. And it came out as a very, very nice little car. And because it was here as duty-free motorsport, I had to compete in it. So I competed in the drag series, and it won and set the 2-wheel drive record, which over here we compete on an 1/8 of a mile, so half of the quarter mile. It's on a race circuit where we're not allowed to put down what they call track bite, which if you ever go to Santa Pod and you try to walk along the track, your feet stick to the track. It's insane how sticky it is. That's track bite. Now, that's great on a drag strip, but it's pretty lethal if it rains. So they don't let us put that down here. So we have an unprepared, very, very smooth and slippy track that we do the 8th on. But again, it's hugely popular. The drag series was, whereas rally takes a bit more money to get into, obviously drag, you can just turn up in your car and do it. So it opened it up to a whole new area of competitors, and it was a hugely popular series. We set the record, got down to 7.2, which is probably about a second slower than second slower than the car would actually do it somewhere at Santa Pod. Car was running about 350 horsepower. The Pro Shift system had launch control, flat shift, auto shift as well, which is the nice one. So you can just pull the paddle and hold it, and it'll auto shift up the gears for you. It was a nice little car. It was good fun. And yeah, I ran that car for the 3 years of the duty-free scheme that I had to satisfy, and I kind of built it as in my mind at that point, it was my final build for a long time. So it was the color I always wanted, the parts I always wanted, the noise, the shift system I always wanted, and so it was built pretty strong, that car. Good little machine, that one.
And so you were involved with Dan in helping him develop Megawatt. Is that true?
Like Dan, what had happened there was it's all linked into Barbados. You see, back when we first started competing there on the Westfield, and I'd go on the Westfield Sports Car Forum, on the club forum, and I would advertise for mechanics. And I would say, looking for a mechanic or two for 2 weeks in, I think it was May back then, the rally used to be. You have to buy your ticket, your flight, but it was subsidized because the tourism board subsidized all the entries back then because there's so few. I'll sort your accommodation, you get 2 weeks vacation in Barbados. I just want 2 days of your time, 1 day mechanicking on the rally sprint and 1 day mechanicking on the rally. Everything else is your time. I'll buy you the drinks at the bar and come out and party, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And Dan, the first year we advertised that, Dan came along. He was a Westfield builder, and he was building himself, I think, a Fireblade engine Westfield back then. And he came out the first year and never missed another year. Just loved it. And at that point, he was a professional motor engineer. So this is fast forwarding to now when he was starting to build his new car. He was a professional motor engineer and a genius with it. I mean, just the attention to detail he puts on builds is incredible. Except his whole push was electric. Electric power. And he had got sick of the UK and just tired of kind of day-to-day fixing someone's brakes, changing the oil, and he could do so much more. And he would do it when he was able to, but it wasn't always. And he said, I'm sick of this. Sold everything he owned in the UK. Sold his workshop, all the cars and vans, all the tools, everything, down to his bike, and moved to Barbados and moved in with us. But he didn't really have a CV or anything that would work for what he wanted to do out here. So his plan was to build from scratch an electric Westfield and use that as his CV, and then get a job with the local electric car company and go from there, which did happen in the end. So what actually happened was he came out here, took 6 months off, effectively splitting his time between drinking rum and building the car. It's kind of a national pastime. In kind of a full circle, he ended up buying Martin's old Westfield Blackbird. So the original car that dragged me in a way to Barbados is the one that Dan bought. But by then it was in a terrible state. It had been left outside in the rain, and it was the engine was blown up, but that didn't matter. It was just ropey, really ropey. So he bought all the bits, stripped it all the way down to a chassis, and when it came down to a chassis, even the chassis needed work in this one. So bars were rusted on it and all that sort of stuff.
Oh dear.
And he replaced all those and went electric. And by this point, there was the odd electric car out there. Westfield had done their own one. There's a few home builds cropping up. And I will try and do the technical stuff that I do know, but I may be lacking in all of it. I'm still not fully up to speed on the electric stuff. But the motors that were out there were all around 200 to 300 horsepower electric motors. But Dan had to beat my car. There's no point in him spending all this time and money building an electric Westfield and then not beating the car engine or the bike engine Westfield. Yes. So rather than have one motor, which would have been more torque than me but less power, he went for two motors, which hadn't been done before. And they're called warp drives. They're about 300 horsepower and 500 foot-pounds of torque each.
Wow.
Yeah, so probably by the time he's done, about five to 600 horsepower and 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, which is, as you know, absolutely crazy in a Westfield.
It is. And huge tires on that thing.
For the road, I mean, we were both running 10-inch wide on the back for the road, but for drag, Dan went full wrinkle wall slick. I think he was on 8-inch wrinkle wall slicks on that one. And it has to be, even when that car was running, he couldn't go full throttle anywhere down.
Well, you'd go sideways down that track.
Correct. And if you've ever driven drag slicks, going sideways in them is not fun.
No.
They have a lot of lateral movement because the sidewalls are so soft that you feel like you're constantly going sideways sometimes. You kind of wobble your way down the drag strip. But yeah, he put the 2 electric motors in there, built the car up, finished it beautifully. Some lovely touches on there. It was running a single, what they call a Zilla controller. The battery pack he put in there was very, I'll say small, but what he was going for was maximum output rather than maximum endurance. And so the endurance of it was quite short, say 20 kilometers or about 4 or 5 drag passes before it needed charging.
Okay.
But the output was huge, like 640.
So it must have been a fairly light vehicle then.
Yeah, it
by
came
electric terms.
Yeah, I think it came in the 540 kilograms around there,
That is light.
which was about the same as the Blackbird engine car.
Yeah.
There was a lot of room. We could have fit more batteries in there.
Yeah.
So like all up front was empty. You look in the engine bay and you see one little motor, 2 wires coming off it. The other motor's hidden in the tunnels because he had widened the tunnel and shoved the engine back there, the motor back there. Had them in series. So there's a lot more room to put batteries in, but the idea was to keep the car as clean and as kind of understated as possible. We've seen these electric builds where, there's batteries in the passenger seats.
Yes.
And there's just wires everywhere. And, I hate that look. I like engine bays and
nice and clean.
Exactly. I mean, I got that from Mick's builds. Mick always kept a clean scuttle and always kept a clean engine bay to the point that half the time you couldn't even tell the engine was wired up.
Yeah.
And with regards to the electric motors, they're even easier to wire up. In most cases, it's just 2 or 3 wires and that's it.
Yeah.
They're the simplest things in the world to wire up as long as you know electrics. It's the battery packs that tend to be messy, but that's why
I'll take your word for that. I'd be wearing rubber gloves and doing it from a distance.
Exactly. I mean, I am still at that stage. I am still kind of petrified of it. Whenever the back of that car is opened up and the charging goes on, and I remember when Dan was wiring it up, and it was something to do with you were meant to wire it up one-handed, because if you wire both hands,
you're grounding it
through your heart, explode your heart, and go out the other arm. I was like, okay, that's reassuring. So yeah, I don't mess with them. I still don't have that knowledge. I was rubbish at electronics and engineering. But yeah, Dan knows it inside out, and he finished that car. He took it drag racing. And smashed the record is the only way to put it.
The first time I was watching you at Bushy Park. I mean, I was watching you in the Mega Busa, in your hybrid Turbo Busa, and Dan's vehicle. It's just like frightening how fast that car gets off the line.
It's horrible. I hate even being a passenger in it. You'll be going kind of down the highway and you'll just be cruising there at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and there's no warning. He just plants the throttle. No hesitation, no warning. It's not like a car engine where you shift down a gear or you might clutch or something, or you feel the revs build, or you feel the boost build up and then the boost kicks in and you go. It just, you touch the throttle and it just goes.
Yeah.
This is what gets me about electric cars. I was driving a normal little i3 BMW on the road for the last year, and even that's quick. And it's the response, the throttle response, there is zero lag. And other than that, when you're launching the car, you get everything at launch. You're not building up an RPM, torque, power curve. it comes down. So
Yeah,
from
yeah.
1 RPM, you've got all. But yeah, he lowered that record. I think he got down to a 6.3 or a 6.2, so nearly a second faster on an eighth of a mile. It was just crazy. That car actually never lost a head-to-head battle at drag.
Yeah.
Mainly because I think it was so demoralizing. It was.
Well, that's what I was going to get to. I mean, I touched base with you a while back and asked you if I could do a walk around with your Westfield. And by that time, you'd already sold it, and then you're pointing out to me you just totally had it with internal combustion engines.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's just amusing to watch the video. In the time that Dan had built that car, drag racing in Barbados was progressing at a hell of a rate. And due to the low grip surface, the four-wheel drive cars were just having the edge. I think the record now is a 6.0 or 6.1. You know, with a bit more work on the megawatts with geometry and such, like, we could probably get to that time. But the four-wheel drive cars still wouldn't launch as well as the Megawatt would launch. So Megawatt would kind of get and Dan's reaction times were excellent. He really had them down to a T. So he'd normally get the jump on a car and it would just be demoralized. And in the eighth of a mile, it'd have no time to catch back up. And it was just hilarious. The crowd reaction to the car, the first time it smashed the record and beat the kind of reigning champion and put lengths of cars on this four-wheel drive Evo, was just hilarious. It was there's a big hill that overlooks the drag strip, and they're very close to the drag strip, and they're very loud because they're so enthusiastic, and there was just silence. People couldn't believe that this car had done what it had done. It was brilliant. It was brilliant, but it's a real love.
It truly is the sound of silence, though. I mean,
it is.
We just sitting there and we're enjoying the sound of an internal combustion engine. Just like you say, it's all sound, but it's no go.
Yeah, it sounds like a golf cart. It really does. It sounds like a golf cart. You hear the tire squeal, and you hear the actual kind of noise of the tire sticking a little to the tarmac as it squelches its way down the drag strip. It's hilarious to watch. It doesn't get the crowd as excited, obviously, because there's no anti-lag, there's no flames popping, there's no screaming RPM, but it is a refreshing change, and they actually took to it. You know, there's a love and hate relationship out there with it that you see. Some people love the electric, some people hate it.
Well, I think it's a migration. I mean, it's evolution, isn't it? I mean, everybody knows of or has at least had a ride in an electric vehicle now. I mean, I've got loads of friends who own them. I don't yet, but it's probably coming. And I guess that's the next point of discussion is you've got an electric Westfield coming.
Well, there's yes and no. We've actually got two builds coming. I've got one going on, which is in a way my kind of final fling with combustion engines. It's all out. It's when I sold my car, I got a good price because I kind of sold my car here at the duty paid price to a degree rather than a duty free price. So I sold it for. It gave me a budget to build something quite special. But at that point, with Dan smashing my car out the park, I had to go crazy. You know, what was I going to do? Fit a Formula One engine? I actually did look at IndyCar engines. And, you know, I was looking at DTM engines, all the V6s and things like that. You know, what do I do? So I'm kind of now that build is, although it's gone on far too long, but I'll deal with that in the next couple of months. That build is going on in the UK. This is what went in that was a SEiynergy engine, which is a V8 macro block bike engine. So that's two Kawasaki engines into a V8. Which has been done. You know, there's a few builds out there. Obviously, there's a lot of Westfield V8s, albeit with Rover. So I think there's been Chevys and stuff like that. I don't think I've seen a Westfield build with a macro block yet. But still, I didn't feel that was enough. I still wanted it to be special. So I chatted with the engine people and we're strapping two turbos to it. You know, so the line there is that I couldn't beat Dan's car with one bike engine and one turbo. So I'm going to try and beat it with two bike engines and two turbos.
Oh my God.
that's the idea there. SEinergy have been excellent. Still really, really responsive. Their engines in naturally aspirated form are about 540 horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
From the engine simulations, we're expecting anywhere from 750 to 1,000 horsepower. But given the build has taken so long, since then, obviously, there have been developments. Andy Forrest has come out with an absolutely amazing machine in the run-up to this, which he went four-wheel drive with an American V8 and two turbos.
Oh.
And his car is flying. I was watching a video of it last night at Knock Hill, where it broke the record. One-time attack by 5 seconds. Albeit his is a very modified chassis. The chassis is like a foot wider. It's very different. But now that's going to be our target. We're going to see, can we beat the four-wheel drive 1,000 horsepower tank that he's built with our effectively lightweight two-wheel drive standard chassis. When I say standard, obviously it's strengthened and mounts are different, but it's going to be a standard width chassis. So that's going to be that battle, which is kind of my last combustion engine build, but I'm making sure it's got every single noise possible. It's a V8, it's a flat plane crank V8, it's fly-by-wire throttle bodies, individual, it's twin roller bearing turbos, it's 2 external wastegates, flat shift, anti-lag, straight cut dog box. It's going to have every noise associated with what we love about cars. So even if it doesn't win, it's going to sound probably as one of the greatest built, one of the greatest sounding cars ever made. Rev to 14,000 RPM. It's going to be amazing. It's Formula One power in a Westfield with very medium-sized aero.
Wow.
So that's that one. In hindsight, given how long the build has taken, because I did start this one 4 years ago, but it's just through problems and COVID and the rest of it, it's been held up. If I was starting that build today, it would not be a combustion build. Flat out, it would not be a combustion build. But we have another build going on that we have in mind. Dan will probably get angry at me talking about it because it's his build, so I can't go too much into detail of it. But it involves one of my favorite car shapes of the modern era, the R8, which will probably nicely be called the I-Rate when we're finished with it. And it will involve probably 2 Tesla motors and about 2,000 horsepower.
Wow.
So that is another build we have ongoing. And then I'm also converting a supercart, a 250 supercart to electric.
Wow.
Although the annoyance with electric is it doesn't get the crowd going because of the lack of noise. But the analogy I would always give is I'm pretty sure if they went up to Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen and said, look, we've got a car for the 2022 season. We can guarantee you the championship. We can guarantee you the championship. You will win in this car. Nothing will touch it. It just sounds a bit rubbish. It's a bit quiet. Do you still want it? Of course they're going to say yes.
Of course.
No, actually, no, it's got to be loud. No. So, if you want to win and if you care about the performance of the car, and you're competitive like that, electric is the way. The throttle response, the ease of maintenance, the simplicity of it is the way. It's so easy to work on. It's so fast. The torque is incredible. It's just at the moment the lacking in electric is really the battery technology.
Yeah, and how? Do you mind if I ask? How are you going to be using it? You're going to continue to drag, obviously, but is it going to be for road courses, or how are you going to use it?
My SEinergy build is my ultimate goal is Pikes Peak with that car. I've always wanted to do Pikes Peak, and the other one I've always wanted to do is Targa Tasmania. Targa Tasmania harks all the way back to my first carbon Westfield. At that point, there was another carbon Westfield in the world, and it lived in Tasmania. I forget the guy's name. I've still got his email, though. And he had a Honda S2000 Westfield that he did Targa Tasmania in. And that's an amazing rally. It's huge. We're talking hundreds of kilometers on that, from snow-capped peaks to, sleety peaks to, tropical beaches. And it really, really interests me, that event. I could never do it because it always clashed with Rally Barbados, and Barbados had the priority. But my goal is Pikes Peak and Targa Tasmania. But short term, it would be Time Attack.
Mm-hmm.
They do have time attack in Barbados now, and it depends how and where the car is finished, whether I compete in the UK. It would be a shame not to put the car head-to-head against Andy Forrest's car, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that would be quite an interesting comparison. My
Mm-hmm.
car should be 100 plus kilograms lighter, a bit more nimble,
Yeah.
but then his car will probably have, well, his car's four-wheel drive and will probably have a bit more power. So that would be a good one to do, maybe 10 of the best or a time attack event somewhere. But it will do drag for sure, and time attack, and then we send it regionally. But the build on my SEinergy is all out. I don't even want to go into the money spent on that. It's everything I have. I don't own a house. I don't have kids, so everything I have goes on Motorsport. And so this build as well has everything, down to spent tens of thousands on the Motec equipment. It's Motec dash, Motec ECU, all the PDMs are Motec, everything, the shift system. I'm trying to kind of build a Formula 3 car in a Westfield shell.
Wow.
So, even down to electronic clutch control with shift tech and stuff like that. So it's the next few things I want to look at are how we're going to manage the traction, linking that into yaw sensors, and as well as the speed sensors, looking into brake control, like things like the Bosch Motorsport ABS system, and getting some wind tunnel time with aero. So it's really going all out, trying to push the boundaries of what can be done. Throughout my life, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of firsts in Westfields. I think we were the first to put in the Quave sequential box. The R1 was a first. All the things that we've gone down the line with little electronic gizmos and stuff like that. Kind of want to, again, push the boundaries a little on what is possible with this one. But it will be my last combustion build for sure. I'm not doing another one after this. Everything after this will be electric, not even hybrid, just pure electric. So it's got to sound good.
Wow. Graeme, you have given me so much material here. We've been going for almost an hour. It's amazing.
I can talk. Don't worry about me. I got more stories.
Oh, no worries. You were taking me down memory lane when you're talking about motorsport in Barbados many, many, many years ago. I dated a gal from Barbados, and her whole family was motorsport nuts.
What was the surname?
Skinner.
Skinner. Okay. And there's a lot of well-known motorsport kind of legacy names in Barbados. There's not really enough surnames to go around. So it's if you ever get the opportunity, come and witness it. It will blow your mind. I could never even watch motorsport as a spectator in the UK. I would just get too frustrated because I'd want to be out there and you'd be shouting at the drivers. It's bearable to watch motorsport in Barbados. It's such an entertainment, and the driving is so good, and the events are just brilliant. So if you ever get the chance, definitely come and witness it. I'm actually leaving Barbados, sadly, in a month or two, just temporarily, before coming back. But yeah, if I'm ever here, just shout me. And even if I'm not, Dan's still here.
Yeah, well, and you've introduced me through Facebook to a cadre of wonderful people in Barbados, and I thank you for that. Just terrific people.
Yeah, well, I should say, just to finish, Dan as well. Dan, after the electric car, he did get a job building the electric Westfield. He did get a job with the local electric car company. He was there for a year and then started his own electric company, which was always his goal, to build and convert electric buses. So the old diesel buses that are kind of falling by the wayside, he converts them to be electric. And so the people are familiar with the bus layout and look, except they run electric, fully charged, solar panels on the roof of the business and stuff like that. So he's hoping for a government grant, but it's why his projects have kind of been on hold of recent, because he's been concentrating on that business and all the money's going to that business. But if a government grant came in and if he started to make some money on that, I think we'll see the projects pick up again from him too.
Well, fingers crossed for Dan. I know you told me he's really flat out working.
He is.
I mean, he doesn't have a moment to give us for this interview or talking about electric cars because he's working hard. But that time will come. I know it, and we'll connect. So, Graeme, I'm going to put a bow on it. We've been going for 50 minutes.
No worries.
I'm probably going to use this whole thing. It's just like great. So anyway, I'm going to say thank you. Enjoy your Barbadian rum. It is the best rum in the world, as you know.
Correct. The birthplace of rum. Correct.
And with that, I'm going to say have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jim.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day. Cheers.